An attempt to be super punctual and keep the tiny talks tiny. It's a 7:30 start, so welcome to the 7th of the NRN Nature Recovery Network's Tiny Talks, which is 30 minutes of connection around nature recovery. Just a quick, I think this invite has gone slightly further and wider than some of the other ones. So we've got some newbies, which is great. And if you do want to get involved with the Nature Recovery Network with this topic or other things, then we will put something in the chat about how to do that. The network is a local network of enthusiasts and experts and local businesses and pretty much anyone who is interested in being involved in nature recovery and conservation. And the idea is that it's a bottom-up network. We've got so much enthusiasm and expertise in our local community. Why don't we use that and learn from each other and take action on a local level? Taking action on a local level is certainly one way that I have in my 30 years of professional environmentalism used taking action to cope with sometimes the overwhelming feelings of around loss of biodiversity and damage to the natural world. So I am super interested to hear what Linda Wishart has got to say to us this evening around how we kind of cope with the emotional side of loss and grief around biodiversity. So Linda's going to take her through. This is a slightly different one, probably slightly different feel to some of the talks that we've had to date. And Linda is going to just talk to us about the work that she does and sort of a psychotherapy viewpoint. But we would really like it if we can we'll leave time for involvement and for comment and for questions. And I know some of you are involved in this generally, also in a professional capacity. So we'll leap that in. So Linda, do please give us your wisdom, and then we can chat about it. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you, Nikki, for your introduction and for everyone for coming tonight. I've attended many of the Tiny Talks and found them really interesting and inspiring, and people sharing their knowledge and practices and enthusiasm and action in the service of nature recovery. And behind the need for nature recovery is, of course, the damage to nature and the losses in nature. And tonight we have an opportunity to think about and reflect on another aspect of that, which is our emotional responses to these losses. And of course, thinking and working in this kind of field, our grief and sadness, and also our fears, anger, guilt, shame, despair, hopes, protest, whatever the feelings are. And it may seem odd to include a talk like this in these series, but in my experience, allowing and supporting the grief and responses in ourselves and together is really vital to both being healthy and whole as human beings, and also in a healthy relationship with nature and in sustaining our creativity and energy and ongoing response. I want to say that I'm sure everything I say tonight will be familiar to everybody. It isn't new what I'm going to say, but I think it is worth having a space in which to say it and acknowledge it together. So I'm going to say a few things to start with, and then, yeah, as Nikki said, hopefully we'll have a bit more time than in some of the other talks for some discussion and sharing our own thoughts and experience. I am sorry to say that I don't have any lovely pictures to share with you all, so I'm not going to share a screen tonight. I don't know about all of you, but certainly sometimes when I'm grieving other losses or I'm run dry, nature and being in nature is a very important way to kind of recover and find some comfort and nourishment. But that's not really what we're focusing on tonight, but I kind of wanted to acknowledge that. But rather, there are times I know that when I've walked locally down to the river and I've been gazing and listening and feeling the earth beneath my feet, and full of sadness and grief at the huge losses in this same nature, the loss of species and the damage to the earth. I think in these tiny talks, these losses have been really present. We heard about the loss of populations of reptiles, or the way they're moving in this country, and about old trees that we've treasured. And the more knowledge we have of what's happening, perhaps the greater the sadness and toll we feel. And also perhaps the more fear and anxiety and much else we may feel too. I think we humans often fear our grief and our sadness, fear perhaps being overwhelmed by it. I know some of these times that when I've walked and felt the loss, even though it's painful, I have mostly felt some relief at actually feeling more connected to reality and more grounded, and a little bit more able to think about how I can respond. I think we probably all know that mourning the death of someone that we love and have lost and have needed is absolutely vital. Grief is integral to being human and going on living healthily. It is the same with the loss of nature, which we love as well as utterly dependent on and are completely interdependent with. I think we've heard a lot about love this week, and sorry for those of you who haven't heard some of the talks. I mean, I've been struck by the love, both people who've spent their whole lives dedicated to understanding certain species in incredible detail, and the love of people acting to protect our very local habitats across decades. And our deep sadness at the impending loss of some of these very local habitats to housing developments that we know are going to happen. Grieving values our love, and it allows our vulnerability, our need, our loss, and our limitedness. I mean, I don't really need to say, but I guess we can feel all sorts of things when we grieve. We feel sad, we can feel very empty, lost. We might feel, and may well feel in relation to nature, guilt about our part in it and much shame. We might feel angry or despairing. And actually the ongoing engagement, knowing what's happening, can be very depressing and very hard to keep going with. I think all these responses are really ordinary. I mean, when I say ordinary, I don't mean they don't matter, but what I mean is I think they are recognizable human responses, and they're actually really important. If we can allow them and mourn, and maybe in time, some energy is renewed, that helps us keep going. I think that one of the things that we're really aware of, well, and I'm aware of in my work, but I'm sure we all are aware of, that sometimes when someone dies, our loss of that person, we can really struggle with grieving for whatever combination of reasons. And we can find it, too difficult to face the pain. And I think it's true also, and maybe even more so, as we try and face the losses in nature. We can become quite stuck or numb, in denial about reality, the realities that we keep on hearing about, we just don't want to hear anymore. Or we might feel very guilty and almost so responsible that we become a bit overwhelmed and paralyzed. or our despair and helplessness swamps us and we become depressed and feel life is meaningless. Or we become permanently enraged. And actually, with many of these things, we and nature are then in much, much, much bigger trouble when we can't process some of this. I think that we need each other to help do that. Now, I'm really aware that this evening there are some people who've joined us, and I'm really delighted, who are probably much more rooted in some of the considerable work that psychologists, therapists, and many others are doing to think about why we humans find it so difficult to face the scale and seriousness of the losses and seem stuck in denial and disavowal and seem unable often to make the changes that are needed in the timely way when we're actually faced with the facts. And of course, there are similar difficulties in relation to climate change, similar related difficulties. So to those of you who I know have joined, and I really hope that you will share in discussion at the end, because I'm not an expert, I'm just local and agreed to try and share what I could. And I think founding this network is in a way a response to some of those difficulties in relation to sustainability and scalability. And it would be interesting to hear more of the thinking in that. I mean, we could spend many of these talks talking about some of the vested interests in why things don't change, the vested interest in things staying as they are. I'm not really going to get into too much of that, but of course there's vested interests of power and profit and lifestyles and political cultures and a sense of entitlement. Why not? Why should I care? One of the things I was also thinking about tonight was how so many losses in nature are cumulative and gradual over time, and we might not, someone dies at a particular moment in time and and they may have been ill beforehand, but with nature, it may not be till things have become really super critical that we really realize that we face the guilt. And I'm guessing that's part of why it's sometimes difficult to grieve until it's become really acutely critical. And I don't know about others, but I know that for me, it feels often just enormous and quite frightening to think about the losses of nature, which is our home, that, it contains us. We don't have another home. And so thinking about the loss of that is actually very difficult. I mean, for me, I think the only place that we can ever start is to connect with nature and face our love and have the support of our friends to feel the love and our need and the loss and the depression or exhaustion or whatever it is, and to feel what we feel and the grief in all its facets. I think that there's something about this network that allows us to connect with nature and each other, to take moments to, if you like, celebrate our love as well as name our grief in what we're doing. And a lot of that will be implicit and sometimes it will be explicit, like tonight. And I think, we've been doing that in all these talks. And in doing so, perhaps we also reflect that we humans actually share the condition of nature. We are finite, we're limited, and we are one with nature in that sense. Well, in many senses. When I was thinking about this talk, the first thing I thought about were some of the words of Chief Seattle, and we're going to read a few because they're what came to my mind. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The deer, the horse, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crests, the juices in the meadow, the body heat of the pony, and men and women all belong to the same family. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. Humans did not weave the web of life. They are merely a strand in it. Whatever they do to the web, they do to themselves. This talk tonight was born in a conversation with Katrina when we were planting a hedge, and we were talking about all these things. And Look, Listen, Lament is the title of a service at Christchurch Cathedral that Katrina told me about in response, generally to losses in nature. And I absolutely loved that. And I kind of thought it was something that we might all take away. Look, listen, lament. Many poets, writers, faith and spiritual traditions of all diversity, cultures, artists, musicians, seek to express both the wonder about nature and lament about nature. And we may all have resources that we turn to and, could share. And I know that some of the local artists have painted some of the paths and fields north of the A40 that are going to be lost to the housing development. And that, when I saw them, I found that really, really powerful. I want to end with some words I came across last year by Joanna Macy, which she wrote in the preface to a collection of Rilke's poems, a collection entitled In Praise of Mortality. Rilke's is not a conditional courage dependent on the afterlife, nor is it a stoic courage keeping a stiff upper lip when shattered by loss. It is courage born of the ever unexpected discovery that acceptance of mortality yields an expansion of being. In naming what is doomed to disappear, naming the way it keeps streaming through our hands, we can hear the song that streaming makes. I'm going to end there and open it with Nikki to reflection and thoughts.
Thank you so much, Linda. I can't tell you, for me, having sort of been doing this day in, day out, just the fact that we're having this conversation and you've opened this space for us to have this conversation and to express things is incredibly liberating, invigorating, and also slightly teary making. So thank you so much for that. I know that people will certainly, lots of people will want to say things. I just want to say that, to pick out, just to start off the conversation, it was probably about a little over a year ago that Renee and I felt that we had to have a coffee, because I think we were both struggling with exactly this, about how we could deal with the kind of the feelings of loss and grief and whatever. And actually just having that coffee for me was immensely helpful. And I really hope that now we've kind of started the conversation, that this within the network, that people feel able to almost to say it and to admit the feelings. So thank you so much for opening up the space for it. So if you do have either you want to share your experience, or if you've got some questions, then do just pop them in the chat or pop your hand up and I'll try and get to you. One sort of kick-off question, I think is probably what we all want to know, is that how can we develop resilience to all these negative emotions? And that's from Kevin. Any ideas, anyone? Linda?
How do we develop resilience to all these negative emotions? That's a very good question. And I suppose the emotions can feel very, very depleting. And I mean, resilience is in relation to that. Well, I don't really know any other way but to allow them in a way where it's supported and not us isolated. I don't, there may be others who want to make some contribution to this.
Absolutely.
I think it's a really serious issue in everyone who's concerned about nature recovery, just as a way to put it, because I think burnout and just feeling depressed is a really big thing. So I mean, I guess we have to find a way to express our anger.
Eleanor Reist, you've posted something in about how do we not burn out. Do you want to add to that at all in words? I'm not wanting to put you on the spot, but Eleanor, I can't see you on my screen, but you must be there somewhere. Are you there, Eleanor? No. Okay, so and I mean you can probably read that, but working on the front line, managing nature reserves on a daily basis, seeing how we abuse the countryside, so much anger and frustration. How do we actually burn out? Stop the sort of burning out.
Okay.
Joe Ham, I know that you're so Joe is an old friend of mine from many years, and I know has kind of long had an interest in this space. Joe, come give us some wisdom.
I can give you some thoughts that arose, but just thank you. Thank you for the talk. It's really really moving to hear as well. So I guess I've had you ended the talk, Linda, with a quote from Joanna Macy and some of the body of work that she's involved with. So the work that reconnects and also Active Hope really provides ways for individuals and groups to work through, the whole load of emotions, working through gratitude and grief and anger, and but doing it in a way that people can acknowledge, and if it feels safe enough to express and maybe transform some of those emotions and really acknowledge, the flip side of grief is love and the flip side of anger is our passion. So for me, they're a way of really kind of working with that transformationary potential. And it just so happens there's a cluster of facilitators in Oxford who would really love to give some workshops or invite people to workshops. So if that's of interest, I can maybe follow up with an invite via Nikki, and there's some also online courses for Active Hope coming up as well. So that's something that can be offered and arranged either online or perish the thought in person. And just to put a snippet in, I did some of my research on the role of emotions in climate change engagement, and also the importance of working with and working through strong emotions, and how that's absolutely crucial to have permission to actually just say how you're feeling, which is what many of you have said anyway, but about turning and facing and working with those emotions can enable that resilience. But it's different people need different things. So for some it's mindfulness, for some it might be the work that reconnects, for some it might be nature connection, but also in a way that can really resource as well. So I'll shut up there. I could go on forever, but
Great. Well, maybe Joe, you can pass some info on to me, and I can put it out through the network. And if people are interested, that's great. But that's obviously, that doesn't in any way downgrade our local community and our our ability to connect with each other. Renee, I think you had your hand up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is helpful to anybody else, but I thought it might be worth sharing. So just particularly on that issue of burnout, when I came to see Nikki and have that cup of coffee, I was in the middle of burning out, and I wasn't in a very good place. And I'm doing my tiny talk next week on fungi, and I found that actually that has been a really critical part of my recovery, is stopping. I'm a fixer. I'm a person who wants to get stuff done and fix. I want to make the world better. And because the problem is so immense, that sense of powerlessness, I think, really got on top of me. And so my antidote to that was to stop thinking about the big picture sometimes and actually not feel guilty about doing that, and focus on the small things, give myself permission to really focus on the things that I could do. And actually I'm also very impatient, and I don't like living slow. So there's been a huge amount of learning for me in terms of actually embracing what nature has to offer in terms of slowing down, focusing on those little things. I've even started drawing some of the fungi that I find, which is something I never thought I would ever be able to do. I've spent hours drawing a single mushroom. And I think that, you know, what you've just said about finding the strategy that works for you, and it doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I'm like, oh, it's so horrible, but it has been actually a really positive experience working through that, letting myself really feel the grief, and then talking to some people and finding some strategies to work through that.
That's great. Thank you. It's a real practical thing. I must remember that. I need to take lessons from you, Renee. I'm very bad at that. Donna Foster has just raised quite an interesting thing in that do you think that the sense of loss of nature and biodiversity is felt widely enough? Sometimes it feels that people just don't realize what we are losing. So you know, it's the kind of those that can see it and those that don't. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's probably true that lots of people don't realise what we're losing, although even though the facts get put out there quite a lot. And I guess partly because it's very painful to hear and very hard to hear. And maybe a lot of people feel very disconnected from nature, or live lives that are quite disconnected.
It's been quite interesting, the sort of the narrative around, you know, COVID. Nature was really important for everyone in COVID and has reconnected people to nature. And I don't know whether that is absolutely true, but it might be a hopeful strand. So.
I think, just coming back to something Rennie was saying about this feeling powerless and a bit overwhelmed, that I think helplessness and powerlessness are such significant parts of what we feel in relation to this, and kind of being a part of, you know, we're finite, having to be able to allow our helplessness, that is actually quite important. Not to just become stuck in feeling entirely powerless, but to find the power that we do have, which might be with fungi, you know, so that rather than feeling we either have all the power or none at all, that we find what power we can have and kind of a way to live with that.
Thanks, Linda. Amanda, you make quite an interesting point by putting don't feel ready to grieve, possibly in denial, which I think is quite an interesting angle, and actually I totally resonate with that. Are you able to say a bit more about that?
Sorry, you would like me to say?
Yes. I just think it's
yes,
point.
just it was great, but my sort of feeling was, no, I don't want to admit that we've lost nature yet. I know species have gone extinct and so on, and there's been biodiversity loss, but I don't feel that I should grieve. But I don't know if I'm just misunderstanding the nature of grief. But what I do feel is that challenged by frequently is anger and disappointment that not enough other people are taking things seriously, and I'm heavily involved in the garden village situation. So that I do find difficulty dealing with. I mean, the only thing I've come up really with is a lot of gardening. That's how I recharge. But there's a sort of cumulative effect over my life as I get older, and I consider my son perhaps having children one day. And I'm really starting to think we're not winning this. But I don't think it's grief, is it? Perhaps you'll correct me.
I think that actually anger is quite an important part of grief, and that, you know, in human loss, you know, if we lose someone, I think anger's a quite normal part of that, even if we don't always talk about it very much. So that actually anger and disappointment you know, is part of grief. And I suppose there's also a difference between it's not all over, but we can still grieve what's changing and being lost, even if it's not all lost, I suppose. But I think that anger is an important part. And of course, I think that's where we also need each other. And, you know, these cups of coffee that seem actually quite important. And it's really quite important that we can call up one another, you know, just on an informal basis, say, can we have a cup of coffee? because I think sometimes then we feel we've expressed it to someone. And it's not just kind of piling inside us, which is when we can become really depressed. So, you know, I do think we need each other.
And I think that is the most brilliant note to end on, bang on 8 o'clock, because actually that is a really, really important part of the network. And I certainly feel really nourished by knowing that there are like-minded people within a half-a-mile radius of me, and all in good time. I really hope that we can do those coffees or those glasses of wine by the river or whatever. So I thank you so much, Linda, for opening the space. This is the start of a conversation, I think, which is absolutely necessary. We will we'll send you info on the stuff from Joe. Lucy's also just posted something about the Climate Psychology Alliance, which offers therapeutic support for climate anxiety. And I'm sure as we broaden climate out to biodiversity, the biodiversity anxiety will be in there as well. So we can pass that on to you, or if there are other things that you want to you know, get in touch as part of the network, then you know where the network is. So if you thank you, Linda. I know everyone will be super grateful, and thank you very much, everyone, for sharing what is sometimes, you know, quite a difficult thing to share.
I'm really grateful for people sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Next one's on Monday, 7:30.